Isolde had always loved the sea, not just for its wild beauty, but for the way it mirrored the tides within her. Calm and stormy, vast and unknowable. It was on a breezy afternoon in Cornwall when she met Calum, an architect with laughter in his eyes and stories stitched into his voice. She was 7 months pregnant then, carrying the child of a man who had walked away before her belly began to show. But she never let that sadness dull her light. She painted in the mornings, ran her fingers along seashells in the evenings, and spoke to her unborn son like he was already the best part of her world. Calum had been on a brief sabbatical, building coastal homes, but mostly seeking peace from his past. When he saw Isolde sitting by the cliffs, sketching a lighthouse with a look of soft focus, he felt something shift inside him. Their first conversation was about color, how skies could never be painted the same twice, and how silence sometimes said the most. He didn't ask about the baby, not right away, and she didn't explain, but he offered her company in the form of long walks, shared picnics, and the occasional stolen smile. Slowly, gently, their connection bloomed like salt-stung roses by the sea. Calum found himself captivated, not just by Isolde's art, but by her strength, her laughter, her fierce love for the tiny life growing inside her. He spoke to her belly like it was already family, calling the baby Orion and telling him stories of stars and castles and quiet bravery. Isolde let herself trust again, not all at once, but in small ways, letting Calum rub her feet when they ached, listening to him hum old Irish tunes as he built her a rocking chair. One evening, under the glow of fairy lights strung across her porch, Isolde placed Calum's hand on her belly, and they both felt a strong kick. Laughter followed, and something deeper took root. Love, not rushed or defined by romance, but shaped by respect and the rhythm of shared days. When her water broke during a stormy night, Calum was the one who drove her to the birthing center, held her hand through the pain, whispered, "You're magic," into her ear as the rain drummed. Outside, when Orion arrived, red and wailing and perfect, they both cried, not out of shock, but because in that moment they were not broken, people finding comfort. They were a family being born. Calum stayed up with the baby for the first few nights, letting Isolde sleep. He sang lullabies in soft Latin verses, rocked Orion in the chair he had built, and made Isolde tea with honey every dawn. Their little home filled with books, baby clothes, and the scent of lavender and lemon cake. He never treated Isolde like she needed fixing. He simply stood beside her, building a life brick by brick. Orion grew with their love, wrapped in bedtime, stories, long beach walks, and watercolor afternoons. They celebrated his first words, his first steps, his first painting. Calum officially adopted him the day Orion turned 2, sealing with law what their hearts had already claimed. Calum and Isolde married quietly, under the same lighthouse she once sketched. Orion stood between them, holding both their hands. When they kissed, the sea roared in approval. Years passed. They built more than a home. They created a rhythm of love, filled with late-night chess by the fireplace, morning dances in pajamas, and handwritten notes hidden in lunchboxes. Even in age, with silver hair and softer voices, their love never dulled. Isolde still painted, Calum still designed, and Orion grew into a boy who knew love not as a word, but as a living, breathing thing in their seaside home, where waves kissed the shore and hearts found safe harbor. When Orion turned 10, they took him to Rome, where Calum had studied architecture. They walked through ancient ruins and traced stories in the marble columns. Isolde painted a watercolor of the Colosseum from their balcony while Caleb read stories to Orion under the golden afternoon sun. On their 15th anniversary, Caleb built Isolde a glass-walled studio overlooking the sea, so her art could always be surrounded by the light and waves that had brought them together. She called it the Heart Room. It became her sanctuary, a place where love echoed in every brushstroke. As Orion became a teenager, he turned the rocking chair into a reading corner. He grew tall and curious, drawn to stars like the ones Caleb once spoke of. They built a telescope together, and on quiet nights, the three of them would sit wrapped in blankets, naming constellations and telling stories under the open sky. When tragedy touched their family in the form of Caleb's brief illness, it was Isolde who became the rock. She painted through the fear and held him close through the pain. Orion, now a young man, took over the cooking, keeping the kitchen filled with his mother's favorite scents. Caleb recovered, frailer but alive, and in their seaside garden, they planted a tree to mark the moment, a cherry blossom named Grace. They told stories beneath it every spring. Decades passed. The walls of their home grew fuller, adorned with paintings and photographs, handmade gifts, and dried flowers pressed into frames. Isolde and Caleb grew slower, but never less in love. Orion became a father, and when he placed his newborn daughter in Isolde's arms, she whispered, "Welcome home, little star." And so the story continued. Always by the sea, always within, the rhythm of love that began with two strangers and a baby boy named Orion.